Realtor's Toolbox here, Loving Life with Lucy Kerr. We got Michelle Haas and Realtor Rich. How is everybody today? Always love seeing your beautiful faces.
Awesome. Super excited to be here.
Right on, right on. Well, today is how long does it take to close a transaction? And then I will go ahead and hand it over to you, Michelle.
Well, the transaction starts before it starts. And when talking to a seller who wants to sell their home, part of what happens is before the contract. So I always encourage my sellers to depersonalize, declutter, and put those personal pictures away. Try to pack up as much as they can, and try to make any repairs if possible. If it's possible to paint, do some yard work, start watering ahead of time to make everything as green as they can. As if trees need to be trimmed, if you have a dead tree in the yard, get rid of it. I mean, a dead tree is such an eyesore. If you've got dead bushes, cut them. I mean, there are things that can be done very inexpensively that really makes a good difference. So getting ready could be 2 weeks. It could be 2 months. It depends on the property. It depends on the owners. Some people have the time and the capability of doing a lot. And you can point out some different things that they should do. Be specific and say, hey, if we can we get rid of this bush, etc. Let's water this a little extra and help that green up. And when it's time for pictures should be approximately a 24-hour process. Sometimes they do take a little bit longer. And once it's picture day, the yard should look ready. The inside of the home should look really simple, as decluttered as possible. And you just have to have that time to do those things. Some people are very physically able to do all of those things themselves. Some don't have time and they'll hire those things out. And some, they just don't have either one. They don't have the time. They don't have the physical capability, the financial capability. And I have to confess to you, I know many agents don't say this, but I have done a thing or two in somebody's house. So, and I don't personally mind. I find it therapeutic. I don't want to go nuts on anybody's property, but, I've had a couple of older clients who just needed a little hand. I don't mind, but sometimes getting ready is short and sometimes it takes a little longer, but be patient. Sometimes the pictures are really good and they turn out well. But having that visual first experience for those buyers is definitely important. And if that takes a little extra time, take it and do what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting the house ready to sell, right?
Yeah.
Everything in the seller's power to create curb appeal and create a good impression. So when people see the house, they're going to be attracted to it. And at whatever level that is, it's going to be different for everybody. But then jumping over to the buyer side, how long does this take? I mean, and these things that we're talking about now are everything about getting ready before you enter into a contract and the escrow period actually starts. What about buyers? What does it take for a buyer to actually get ready? How long does that take? Well, a lot of that's going to depend on the buyer, right? Do they have all of their income documents and everything ready to go for the lender so they can be easily pre-qualified? So the lender is going to look at things like the credit report and the credit scores. They're going to look at current income and work history. They're going to look at assets, whether that's money they have in a checking or savings account, or if they're pulling it from an investment account, or maybe even from their retirement account, trying to get the money together and getting that organized. So depending on the client, that can take as little as 2 or 3 days, and it can take as long as maybe a month or 6 weeks if they have unfiled income taxes. Everyone's at a different starting point. Right. So people that are ready to go, they get all their documents to you. They've got great credit, great income and assets. It's easy to verify. And just like that, they're fully pre-qualified ready to go. The lender issues the letter, the buyer's agent has it, and now they start looking for houses. So how long does it take? Well, a little bit of time to get their financial picture in order for the lender, and then finding the house, depending on how picky the buyer is. It could be as little as 3, 4, 5, 7 days. The buyer is not picky at all. They just want to own a house, and they don't almost care what it is. They just got to get a house. Yeah. I saw that happen recently. The buyer was so motivated and not picky. Inside of about 8, 9 days, she was in contract and had a house. So was in escrow to purchase the house. So a little bit of time for actually finding the house. You make the offer, and now you go into contract. This is where the buyer and the seller come to terms. And at this point, there's a whole separate escrow period timeline that starts. And typically that takes what, about 30 days, Michelle?
It's about 30 days. Yeah, that's a standard. It could be a little faster, it could be a little bit longer, but we like 30 days. One of the first steps that buyer is going to do once the contract has been signed on both sides, accepted, fully executed is what we like to say. The first thing they're going to do is deposit their earnest money with the title company. So standard sort of tradition is about a 1% of sales price to the title company. And with other types of loans, that earnest money could be a lot lower. For example, VA loans we traditionally do a little bit of a lower earnest money deposit, but still standard is about 3 days on that deposit. And that is one of those things that both parties, listing agent and buyer's agent, should make sure happens within that window. We don't want that time period to go long, because what it's showing is the lack of interest on the buyer. So we want to make sure that happens on both sides.
That's right. And what about inspections, Michelle? I mean, jumping from the EMD, once the earnest money deposit's been deposited, that happens right away. In the meantime, inspections are being scheduled, right? What typically do you see for time on that?
So standard is a 17-day window on any kind of pest inspection or home inspection. Any other kind of inspection you want to do is standard. When I represent my buyers, I like that to be done within a week. I will schedule the very first available time. I like my buyers there. We show up to the house. We ask inspectors different questions in person. We see things in person. And I like that to be pretty quick to give any kind of negotiation that might happen ample time to talk about things, and for buyers to think about things. If they find something that they don't like, then they have some time to do some additional research if that's needed.
Yeah, that's right. A really good point, Michelle, because with the inspections, the quicker they can be scheduled and completed, the better. Because one of the other things that's going to be required if they're obtaining a loan is they're going to need to get an appraisal done. So mind you, timeline's going on here. But now with the inspections, like if you have to get an electrician out, that can be a $400 inspection. You can have what for a home inspection? $400 or $500 for a home inspection. Maybe you need a chimney inspection. I mean, there's a bunch of different things, but the buyer is starting to spend money. So the earlier the inspections can be completed and reviewed quickly, if they decide they're not moving forward, then you don't even need to order an appraisal. Or if they're loving everything they're seeing and hearing, then that appraisal is being ordered right after the inspection. So we like to see all that happen as early as possible in that timeline, because it keeps everything moving, and it can also save them a little bit of money if they end up not moving forward with the house for some reason, because we don't want to unnecessarily be spending the buyer's money. Because some of these inspections, by the time they're all done and paid for, you can be $1,500 into inspections pretty easily. And then you have an appraisal, which is going to add to that, because once the appraisal's done, that's a third-party service provider. They need to be paid as well. That's so right. What about the appraisal? It really depends on the market. So during times when interest rates are really low and lots of people are buying, there may also be lots of people that are refinancing, and the appraiser resources in terms of appraiser availability can really become scarce. And it can take, we've seen times where it was so busy, it was taking up to 3 weeks to get an appraisal done. So this can all extend out the timeline. But in a typical market, it's not uncommon to see appraisals being completed in 3 to 5 days, which is typically what we like to see. And if the market's slower, you might be able to get an appraisal turned around in 1 to 3 days. It just depends a little bit. But it's important to pay attention to the market in terms of the timeline of closing the escrow period. But then that also can add to your closing in terms of the timeline. Are you going to make it in a 30-day escrow if you got 21 days to get an appraisal? You might still make it. It's going to be tighter though. So anyway, that's kind of all I wanted to say about that.
It definitely can be done. I mean, 21 days should be enough time for that appraisal to be done. And oftentimes I'm seeing that the lenders are ordering those appraisals pretty quickly. And then sometimes if they are backed up, they've paid additional fees and asked for the job to be rushed.
That's
to
right.
Make sure that it gets closed on time. And so, yeah, there is some flexibility with that when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at some point, the loan contingency is going to be removed. This is typically after the entire loan's been approved, including the property. Now they're going to remove the loan contingency. And at that point, usually all the contingencies are removed. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yes.
Usually by then, everything's removed. And now it's just rocking and a rolling to get to, a couple of other things. And then you're going to have signing and closing.
Clear to close. We love to hear that from the lender.
Yes, clear to close. Final walkthrough. The CD's issued, usually a few days before they can sign. It's like 3-day waiting period. And then they sign their loan documents. And then depending on the lender, they can close either the next day, sometimes same day they sign. If they sign early in the morning, or maybe it'll be a day or 2 or 3 if there's a couple of other paperwork conditions that need to be gotten over to the lender. You might have, some prior to funding conditions. So that might take a day or 2 in there. But then at that point, the loan's funded, the title company releases it to be recorded, and then the agent does what at that point? Gives them the keys. Celebrate. Give them the keys. Yeah. Michelle, what about buyers that are going to pay cash? What does that do to timelines?
Well, I think a lot of what holds up any transaction is the lender, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but things have to happen for the loan to go.
Cash buyers. No, I'm saying.
Love cash buyers, right? I think the fastest I've ever heard of was 4 days. If you've heard of faster than 4 days, put it down in the chat. But it really, at that point, it's up to the title company. And the title company is just doing everything that needs to be done, for the recording and recording with the county. So it can be really quick if it's cash and all parties agree. If that buyer is really just paying cash, not worried about inspections, for whatever reason, maybe they're a general contractor already and they understand it. They're a skilled investor and they understand what they're getting into. And if that makes the seller happy and everybody's happy, go get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and not uncommon to see a 10 to 15 day closing on an all cash buyer. Some cash buyers, they're taking it as is, but they still want to do some inspections to know what they're getting into. So they may do a few inspections, and then you're looking at 10 to 15 days for closing, which is nice. That's a quick closing. And, people like fast closings, especially if, the property's vacant. That means people are spending money and not getting the benefit of owning the property. So, so typical escrow period, once you go into contract, about 30 days. Repair issues can extend it out, wouldn't you say, sometimes? Depending on, in the inspections, if repairs come up, maybe it's going to take 7 to 10 days to get a new roof put on and the seller's paying for that. Or a lot of times the seller just says, hey, we'll give you the $10,000 to $1,000 in a credit and we're not going to fix the roof. You fix it on your own later, which is kind of nice for the timeline. But sometimes the repairs have to be done before closing, and maybe that extends a little bit. 30 days is pretty typical. And if the house is super clean, you can close even with a loan 15 to 20 days. So,
yeah, right on. And absolutely. And you know what? That is the subject on how long it takes on closing a transaction. You got the buying side, and then you got the seller side. So much additional information. Please subscribe to us, and you can go ahead and catch more videos on how long it takes to close a transaction. Thank you so much, Miss Michelle Haas. Thank you, Realtor Rich.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Great to be here. Realtor's Toolbox.
Hey, see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.